Thanks for being here, and anybody else who may join later. Just a few things. Tomorrow we have an 11:30 meeting with Paul McLean over Zoom. He's just going to give us a nice recap of the NAB show. Big thing, Friday, July 17th, 11:30 up at Lookout Mountain Park. Hopefully we don't get booted again this year. We'll do our picnics. So you can go to SBE48.org, go to the meeting page, and you can register there. And then here in, I guess, just over a week, the SBE membership drive will end. Recruit members, have them put your name in the referral list or the referral spot, and you can be entered to win prizes from the SBE, as well as getting $5 per person. I think they cap it, but you can get some money off next year's renewal for your membership. And it's always fun to try to see if we can get new people to join us.
So Nathan, you should. I'm sure RCS would pay for
it. My brains are churning right now.
And the picnic would be a great event to come out to. It's in a beautiful spot on a mountain outside of Denver. Yeah, good barbecue.
That's all I have. So Nate, you can take it over.
Awesome. Let me share my screen here. Boom. I'll go ahead and start this slideshow from here. Move this over. All right. So today we're going to talk about is the future of radio software. And I kind of want to make this more generic and talking about where the industry is going and some of the changes that we've seen in here. But the biggest takeaway that I want to talk about is really identifying what you're looking to achieve and having your vendors help you navigate to that desired result. Essentially we're seeing more and more is obviously we know there's the farm system that was there a decade ago, which is not there now, and it's not exactly getting replenished anyway. But more specifically, there's different types of users looking to achieve different things. And what happens is something that you're looking to do, most likely somebody else is already doing it. And so rather than having you try to take the resources and the time to figure it out yourself, look to the vendors to help navigate you where you want to be. And one of the things that RCS provides is that flexibility of we want to meet you where you are. And one of the things we'll talk about is, the cloud, AI, visual display, and just really understanding some of the vocabulary of those things. And my goal here is to kind of talk about some vocabulary so that you'll see when it comes to the cloud, there's different kind of takeaways. What are you trying to achieve? What do you want to achieve? And really have that conversation with your business deciders, what they're trying to do. So when we say things like the cloud, right? Is the cloud really a solution for you, or is it a version of the cloud like disaster recovery? And we're going to talk about some of those things today. So just an introduction outline, as I mentioned, vendors work with clients of various sizes to manage new situations. So the idea that, again, something that might pertain to you could be a workflow that somebody else is already doing and exploiting, right? We can help get you there. How can you fix we didn't know existed in the first place? I'm a big believer on that, especially when it comes to the cloud environment and some of those different solutions. A lot of times what I found is engineers trying to fix the problem in their head, not realizing that that's not really the problem at hand. There's a different type of solution, ignoring that entire workflow altogether. And again, asking around, putting that legwork in, that's a big part of this. I can't tell you what you need to achieve, but if you come to me and say, this is my problem or this is what I'm trying to resolve, I can absolutely point you in the right direction and get that taken care of. So again, modern radio automation solutions, they pose new problems, right? Different types of solutions have different types of problems. Where does the cloud and AI fit into our radio solution? Again, you'll see some slides here where I talk about why the cloud or why not the cloud, right? And the technology is really leading the way for this, and it's trying to understand where you're trying to be. And what we've seen a lot is for disaster recovery that allows us to have both of those hybrid solutions with the traditional radio while evolving into modern radio. And of course, we have innovative metadata deliveries we'll talk about as well. So again, why switch to the cloud or why not? And what we found is really it's a business decision. And what we found is at NAB, we were just talking about that. I had one of my users came to me and said, I just put $50,000 down in a brand new state-of-the-art studio with all brand new hardware, audio over IP boards, monitors, TVs, the whole bit. Why would I go to the cloud? Well, exactly. You just put $50,000 into your solution on-prem, right? That's totally fine. And so what we found is other users have come to us and say, hey, I have a couple markets that, are currently analog, unlike the rest of my audio over IP environment. And there's a lease that's about due at the end of the year. And I don't really want to spend the money to go and not only convert the real estate cost, but build new furniture and create furniture the entire new studios. I got to switch my analog to audio over IP. I got to get all new everything else. And it's like, that's a big cost. And so for them, they would much rather take those markets, those satellite markets as they are, and rope it into their corporate headquarters and then use the hardware aspect to distribute the audio to those local sites. And again, because we're so used to the old pre-COVID school method of, we live and die in the radio station. Now it's more of a, hey, I can work from home and be live and prioritize content remotely if I wanted to. The other thing is also maintenance. We have some users who are listening, like, I don't want to maintain this environment. We've seen some users saying, hey, I have a 5-station cluster. There's a couple HDs in my cluster. They're being operated out of the production rooms. I know that their servers or machines are going to be replaced in about a year or so. And I just don't want to replace them for HDs. There's not a lot of revenue in there. So I want to get rid of that room altogether. And we still want to prioritize content here too. And so what we've seen is some of these, when you look at the real estate and how we're developing that content, they're not necessarily these radio production rooms anymore. They're content creation rooms. And what that means is we're essentially allowing that, that studio to be multi-purpose. We give it a multi-track editor. We have a decent microphone. They go in there. They're recording whatever it is, TikTok videos, this, that, or whatever. That's what we're seeing right in the field. Again, talking about resources, budget's part of it. And then there's redundancy. And that's another big part of it, because obviously we want to make sure we still respect the redundancy part of it. And what we're seeing, we just saw the FCC just talked about, I think today in the trades, he was talking about that cybersecurity is a known thing that's not going to go away. And I have had conversations with, again, Chris, this is referencing this, a Windows XP user at an old school selector. And I kind of gave him a little bit of pushback on, hey, like, what's your concern about, cybersecurity? He goes, oh, I'll never get attacked. I was like, well, how are you so sure you won't get attacked, right? And so that level of redundancy adds a new complexity to this, right? And again, what we're seeing is traditional versus these modern radio practices, right? The idea that, we have all these products with years and years of development and features being live and local and all that stuff. We don't want to lose that if that's your goal, versus that modern radio, which is identifying certain markets, certain HDs, certain formats that could be maybe benefiting in regards to budget and how that can help you out, right? So wanting to have this conversation with the business decisions in your life. So what role do virtual machines play into the automation process? We get a lot of the buzzwords, virtual machines in the cloud. Really start to harp on, what does this mean, right? There are some users that use virtual machines in the cloud intertwined, and that's not exactly the case. And there's some solutions where they say this is a cloud solution, and it's not. So when they say things like this protects you from a cryptoware attack, but it's a virtual machine residing in a data center, that machine's got an OS. It can get attacked through there too. So it's not a real true cloud solution, right? So understand the vocabulary. In regards to virtual machines, I have a lot of users, especially some NPR sites, that have these nice beefy machines. And the idea is that, hey, can I put some offsets my resources in the VMs? Absolutely. From my perspective, it's about resources, budget, and redundancy. So the idea is that those resources, if I have a server that I want to switch to a virtual machine, totally fine and dandy, but you got to pay for those resources, right? Those cores, CPU, the RAM. If you're not familiar with the VM world, that can get pretty pricey pretty quickly, which brings us to the budget, right? Do I have budget for this VM machine? I have found typically, like, those who I have this conversation with, if it's really like, hey, I want to put this in a VM environment, they have the budget or the machine already approved, which leads us to redundancy. Because then I have this nice, beefy VM server. Can I put all my operations on that? Sure. But what happens if that VM server goes down for whatever reason? And the next thing you know, you have all of your environment down. So make sure you take into account redundancy. So most commonly, we have some users who want to either virtualize the actual control room, just the individual client, or they want to virtualize the server environment and they put a local machine in the control room for redundancy purposes. So just a reminder for you to make sure we talk about where that redundancy is in play. Again, define the VM roles. So then it turns into what role does the cloud play into your automation, right? Again, the vocabulary, a true cloud solution. Here at RCS, we have a true cloud solution written for and on AWS, following best practices in security. We built an RCS security platform as one of the first pieces of our full RCS cloud umbrella, so that when we start looking at things like Selector Cloud and Zeta Cloud and Audio Display, all of those are done in the umbrella of RCS Cloud, utilizing RCS security, your two-factor authentication, utilizing RCS Connect as a middleware to safely and securely have your resources shared to and from. So a cloud is just a piece of that radio air chain puzzle. We know that a lot of our users, one of the next things we're seeing, so if last year was kind of really identifying and starting to introduce the cloud, what we're seeing now from the next year of evolution is the scaling portion of that cloud. Because obviously if I have one station, that's great, but if we start to expand that, what we've seen is how can that provider handle the node scalability, right? Some of these nodes they have require manual intervention, and we're working in this kind of, modern environment. We need to scale based on the on-demand of our listeners. And so that's a very important question to ask is, well, how does your environment scale? And we always say here at RCS, we know it works because we have an environment that has 750 radio stations currently operating solely in the cloud as automation, right? That seems to be pretty scalable for the most part. Again, we can also focus on one piece of this air chain, like disaster recovery. I want to take my on-prem system, back it up with audio, metadata, schedules, SQL backups, and all of that for the next level of redundancy. Again, diversifying my redundancy portfolio. But really, it's about asking. I felt right now when you're trying to learn and have this conversation is to ask the right questions, right? What type of redundancy do you have? Is it a VM in a data center? Is it a player? Is it East player, West player in an AWS region? We've had some users early on get lost in, well, what if AWS goes down? And that's a fair assessment. So what we did is we found as a part of the redundancy plan on our end, most systems have an edge device. So we have an RCS edge device at the transmitter site that has a failover A and B connected to it. So we have East goes to West or vice versa. And we have a hardware solution at the transmitter site that does both. So what if AWS goes down? Well, you have your locally cached audio and logs on that edge device. Another thing we get to is, what if I lose internet? Very fair question, but there's two different ways of looking at that. If I'm Nate operating from my home right now and I lose internet, the radio station's not going down. My connection to the radio station has been lost, right? Whereas if I'm at my transmitter site and the transmitter site loses internet, yes, we can't communicate with that cloud, again, defaulting back to the RCS edge device to keep us on the air, right? And of course, I've had some users where, well, if AWS goes down, that's a problem. But also, if all of AWS goes down, you've seen all of the people who go to try to bring that back up as soon as they possibly can, right? Again, I talked earlier about true cloud solution or VM solution in regards to cryptoware attack to the data center. And also really make sure you identify each piece of the air chain and its delivery. What we've seen is as we start to, really have more options in the cloud environment, double check and see what they are. As I mentioned, the scalability, also the middleware. So we've had some users that use a Dropbox, for example. But if you're concerned about AWS going down, what about Dropbox going down? What if Dropbox is in charge of your auto load and Dropbox goes down for an hour at 5 p.m. or 4:30 p.m. on a Friday? Imagine if Dropbox went down this weekend, which is Memorial Day weekend, and it goes down at like 4 p.m. That's a prime driving time. And we get traffic updates? Do we get weather updates? You have all these things. What's the auto load going to be? So just make sure you really identify each piece of that air chain and who's in charge of that air chain, because you also want to get into a habit where I call up one vendor and I say, hey, listen, I can't, my auto load's not working. And they're like, oh, well, Dropbox is down, so you'll have to wait for that to get that fixed, right? That's not, I think, a very valid and fair question. So very briefly talking about the topography we were just talking about. So this is at least our Zeta Cloud design. What you see here essentially is right there in the, if I can move my cursor, there we go. This center here is the big piece of the puzzle. This is the, we call it director. It's the admin portal of our Zeta Cloud and RCS cloud solution. And the idea is that that has all of your AWS, all of those, services and all of that's built into director. And the reason why it's important to note is because when I make a change in director, it's replicated in both environments, both west and east. So I'm not doing the same task twice. I'm applying the task that is applied to both zones and regions. And so what we do is we have the RCS edge device down here is, again, tied to director. That's tied to west. That's tied to east. That has a CDN delivery as built into those player solutions, that then the CDN and the edge device and all of that goes right to your transmitter site, typically living at your transmitter site. And then from there, we have our easier user access. These are users that are essentially accessing the cloud. And then we have offsite those offsetting some of those resources. So we have some users, let's say, have G Selector, and they put that on a machine with an RCS Connect. That makes connections right to our RCS cloud instance. So that's kind of a brief topography of how that's designed. Any questions on that before I keep going, by the way? Cool. Understanding the service. So again, proven scalable service. Understand those that have proven business models versus unproven service models. The biggest thing here is that when we're putting when you have a vendor that's hosting your product, that's hosting your revenue, we need to know and have that conversation of how they're going to handle that. In our end, we have SLAs in place when you have our solution that we know that works with over 750 stations. But again, the scalability aspect we talked about earlier, and those large environments, those listener spikes, if you will, can we expand with it? What's going to happen when I put my revenue in your cloud solution, right? And then look at the business model itself. One of the things that we haven't seen just yet is what happens if this, is a short-term vendor solution and all of a sudden they decide in a year from now, hey, this cloud thing's not working out, I'm going to move on, right? What happens then? So again, that's the biggest part of it, understanding who's using it, how they're using it. And even just doing this, we're rapidly scaling. So when I did this like 2 weeks ago, it was 650. And then in conversations last week, I found out it's now 750. So even that is 100 stations more. And then, of course, how is the vendor supporting the service? That's the last thing, too, is asking these questions, right, from your perspective. What's the time zone? We've seen some European, things where, hey, you got to call after hours, that type of thing. Is it only email or phone? What is your knowledge of the situation? This is cloud. It's relatively new. You kind of want to have, I don't want to have somebody like, hey, I think I'm off the air. Oh, we'll get back to you in a couple of days. No, that's not acceptable, right? That type of thing. So definitely these are very important questions to ask when we start to try to understand that service. And again, the goal here is to talk about when you're talking as a business decision, when you're talking that C-level, whoever it is who's signing those checks, and they come to you and say, Dan, I need to have the cloud. I need to have AI. I need to do this. Well, sometimes it's not really about you saying, well, no. It's about, okay, well, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to do this? Trying to do this? Trying to do this? Oh, well, I have this over here. Great. Can you scale? Can you have large environments? Do you do this? What if I call support? Blah, 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 blah. Is a true cloud solution? These are questions that hopefully you can start to learn to ask to better understand those type of solutions. Any questions on the cloud side before we kind of pivot to our good friend AI?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Sure.
You probably don't want to name names, but have you seen a bunch of instances where a provider with a cloud-based solution wasn't able to scale like on the fly or.
So what you're going to start to see is just that. Because when you look at the clients that are utilizing the platforms, you can start to see who's on it and how they're using it and the scale of how they're using it. And there's two ways of looking at it. There's the physical aspect, which is I'm housing 750 stations. And then there's also the I have, 15 users working inside the software, that type of thing.
Right.
So there's some centralization workflows that could or could not, come into play. Or there's just generically like, hey, we can do all this. Like, oh, yeah, we can talk a big game. But that's why I always get to revert back to the 750 stations, because I know that we currently have 750 stations online right now, right? Just like in the Zeta world, when I talk about, hey, how many auto loads can I have? I talk about the big giant guy in that we have that literally has 800 auto load profiles. I don't think we're going to have 800, so I think we're okay. But I can say that because I know we have 800. Right? That type of thing.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So moving on to our friend AI. So I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I keep bouncing between the anti-pro AI whole thing. And so for the purpose of this conversation, for the purpose of SBE, again, I'm highlighting the vocabulary in the conversation, right? I'll leave it up to us or you to just figure out if this is a great fit, bad fit, or whatever it is. I literally kind of had a little bit of a, and then I was at CRS, had a great presentation on AI, and I got all motivated, and then I tried to implement some of it, and I'm like, wait a second. And I started talking to some other users, and we'll get to that in just a second about how all of a sudden, well, if we're all using the same AI, aren't we kind of all using the same AI with the same result when you think about it? So, AI workflows versus AI creation. Your boss going to go to you and say, hey, Dan, I need you to go and incorporate AI. Okay, how? Amanda, are you doing voice work? Chris, are you doing workflow work? Like, there's so many different types of AI. So the first thing is identifying what AI you're looking to achieve, right? So workflows to utilize third-party tools to help automate tasks. One of the great things this presentation did was he talked about how they're using their content with AI. So the idea is that they have talent, they have the on-air jocks, and they're creating elements, and they're using the AI to help push social media posts. So we film our studios and our live breaks. We then take the mix down of that morning show. We use an AI tool to highlight and segment all of the morning show content that we did that was on camera. We then find there's a couple programs that give you summaries or highlights, whatever it is, of that clip and that video. We take that and then we slice it up, make it individual, and send it to the socials for TikTok and all of that stuff. That's great, right? Or having some users are having their talent recording their voiceovers and recording their voice on things, and then they're self-building, again, more videos for TikToks, promos, whatever it is, that type of thing. So really, like, AI is not going to solve radio's problems, right? What is AI going to do for you to help you solve your problem that you're approaching? One of the ones that I saw that made a lot of sense was they had a, company-wide, they want to put more social media posts and they want to have that bigger social media push. That helps them do that. It helps them automate, isolate, identify content breaks to share across, the web, right? That's what they're looking to achieve. I think off the bat, I came from a small independent, company with a couple of stations. We, end up losing our one female hire. They wanted to have female scripts. So, that could be an AI solution to counter all those male voices you have. They have 2 or 3 salespeople, right? And so maybe script writing is something where you can quickly go and say, take this client, create a 60-second script, proofread it, please, and then, make sure it makes sense. Like, I can see that really helping a lot of smaller operations. Absolutely. And of course, there's some scary parts of that AI too, which we'll just save that for a different conversation, but I'm acknowledging it for the purpose of acknowledging it. And there's also primary, secondary content. If I'm doing weather and traffic and news, that could be a nice little thing that AI could bring to the table from a voice perspective, right? Obviously, I personally am very sensitive to the creativity aspect, but it is what it is, and we are where we are, right? So where does AI currently stand? I think the funniest thing I get from my perspective working with stations trying to incorporate AI is a lot of them felt like, oh, AI is here. Great. Do it. Do my voice. Go ahead. And then all of a sudden I got this quick response of, you know, Nate, I could pay a part-timer. They can do a better job. Yes, that's the whole point. If I can pay a person to do a better job, wouldn't you pay a part-timer to do a better job? Right? So yes, there are certain things that, okay, maybe it's not the best solution for you or whatever it is, right? The second thing is, I always find it hysterical because I said, okay, here's the AI, here's how it works. A lot of the integration with third-party AI tools, right? First off, they all use the same AI generator, which is 11 Labs. That's just across the bat. So when you see all these, we do AI differently, we do this voice differently, whatever. No, they're not. What they're doing is they're picking 11 Labs as base voice, and they're applying variables to that voice in a UI perspective. So some might have an extra couple settings, which is just their way of translating the 11 Labs original voiceover work. We partner with Xperi for us, with Futury. And we have the radio AI platform. And what we do is our integration is we send them the log with the log elements that match on the AI generated scripts that then send back to us to land automatically. So it's a flowing little environment, right? But the funny thing is that, you know, we said, okay, here's your thing. And they said, wait, I got to rebuild all my clocks? Well, yeah. Wait, I got to tell it to say this is the weather? And I got to tell it to say it's the weather in a nice tone for 30 seconds. And don't forget to say this afterwards. Yeah. And it's funny how a lot of, you know, programmers and owners look at this and they just assume that it was like, oh, just be AI. Just do it. And no, there's a lot of legwork that you have to do to build that in there too. And of course, there's little things like, you know, we found that U2 was a fun one because it didn't know what U2 meant. And obviously U2, when you look at that phonetically from all across the radio world, there's all these different ones that come into play. And then, you know, all of a sudden it turns into U2, but like, what does U2 mean? So you can tell it say U2, but if I'm saying like, you know, that was U2 Sunday Bloody Sunday or whatever, it's gonna be like U2 Sunday Bloody Sunday? Like the tone's not there because it doesn't know how to deliver that type of delivery. So we're still learning some of those AI voice generators as well. Right? Now, there's some things from the workflow perspective, like wouldn't it be nice for something like a music scheduler to have AI to help you pick some new music, some category changes, stuff like that? We're seeing some of that stuff come down the pipeline, wink, wink, nudge, nudge as well. So there is some benefits there to help you out and make your life easier. But again, I just feel like there's a lot of assumptions that AI is just going to be here, it's going to help us, and then we can remove humans, and it's all fine. I push back on that a little bit. I really do. And then, of course, you know, from a industry standpoint, from a consumer perspective, you know, some people have said, I know that, again, at CRS, they did a big, extensive study about AI, and shocker, every person asked if they prefer a live human or an AI to be on the air for talent. They all said, I want a live person. They're my friend. They're my best friend that I hang out with. Monday through Friday, 3 to 7 p.m. That's who I want to do, right? Which is why when you go back to be specific with the voice, the news, traffic, and weather, that gives you some of that flexibility. So now when you come to us and say, Nate, budget's an issue, or I have to include AI because that's the buzzword and I just have to do it. My boss loves AI or whatever it is. Now you can start saying, okay, well, I don't want to sacrifice, I don't want to cut my nose, spite my face. I'm going to go and say, hey, I can feel a need of this here. I'm going to execute it on this end so everybody wins, essentially. So again, notice how there was both. I'm not saying this is the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. It's about having that conversation and what works for you and for your station. That makes sense? Coolio. How are we doing for time here? Okay, great. Next thing is disaster recovery solutions. So as we talk about, you know, some of these different type of things, we start talking about disaster recovery. And the biggest thing there is, what is your disaster recovery plan? Both cybersecurity or a physical natural disaster, whatever it is, right? So we have modern delivery mechanisms. That's one of the biggest things that engineers are having kind of not a hard time grasping, but I'm a visual learner, so I like to see it. That topography graph, seeing the edge players at the transmitter site, seeing the A/B failovers, those are things that I'm like, okay, that makes sense, right? We have a live console for our Zeta Cloud. It's just a studio. So what you don't see is that there's a physical studio URL. So when I go to my live console, I'm going to the Dan studio. The Dan studio is just is a laptop. That's all it is. And the Dance Studios laptop has the following Windows settings. I have a Focusrite on here. When I have a Rodecaster, the Rodecaster plugs right in and has a MIDI controller to control the faders. And I can do that because that Rodecaster is tied to my computer, who has Windows devices that are authorized by Chrome, who then taps into an actual setting in my live console in Zeta Cloud that says, how am I playing audio? Where's the microphone input? And that's how I make those connections, right? Again, multiple redundancies in place, not just a single device somewhere, not just an on-prem solution. The idea is that you're building your redundancy plan, right? I've had some users, this was crazy. I had one user in the early days of Zeta Cloud DR. He's like, hey, so curious. I have, as a negotiation with my direct competitor, I have a room with a studio in his office, and he's got a room with a studio in my office. And so if anything ever happens, we're allowed to go into each other's offices and do an emergency broadcast from this little closet. Kudos to you on that one. I don't know how you guys played so nicely there, but that's great. A lot of us don't have that capability, right? So I have a great transmitter site. I have an off site, whatever it is. That's awesome. But some of us have to get creative on those DR solutions, right? Encoders and streaming URLs. I have some users, I'm not going to lie to you. They have a Nautel transmitter. It takes a URL. There's no reason to have a edge device at their site because they're going to pipe it in directly to the transmitter. Cool. That's amazing. Good for you. Others don't have that situation, so we have to look at different encoders in there too. So again, defining your destination, streaming to a secondary studio, transmitter, multiple CDN mounts to the cloud, how you're getting that disaster recovery solution where you need it to be. Typically, again, it's at the transmitter site. But then we have the audio backup and redundancy as well. Just a second location, because you got to imagine if you have everything in-house and anything ever happens, fire, flood, or any of that stuff, we've seen more and more happening, right? We want to make sure we acknowledge if there's a building issue on how we're going to stay on the air and go from there. And the thing, too, we always kind of laugh a little bit is there's a lot of, we're here in radio, we don't like change in radio. And so one of the things that I get a lot of pushback on is both the cloud and disaster recovery and all of that. And the reality is we joke and say, what's your email? Email has been cloud-based for decades, right? Like, we don't know. Where's your email housed? Oh, in the cloud. Oh, wait a second. That's weird. And we're just continuing that process. The second part of that is the cost and execution of that as well. Why would I put my money towards a disaster recovery or a cloud solution? Well, remember when we had the business phones and now we're sitting here having all these conversations on Zoom and Teams and all that stuff? Like, that was part of your budget years ago. And now we're ditching the phones and using a digital solution as well. That's just like we're doing with radio, right? It's very, very similar in nature. So again, embracing that change, a lot of this has already been proven in the fields, and you're probably doing it yourself on top of that. Next up, innovative metadata. So this is kind of a thing that I added on as part of modern radio software. I've seen this been more and more of a conversation. I've seen some stuff that I've found curious myself. And in the past couple of years, doing all these trade shows, I've seen more and more interest in it. So I thought it was worthy to talk about here. The idea is that I am going to incorporate visual audio into my air chain. It's definitely, sometimes people see and go, well, that's an added expense. And I have one more thing to do. It starts based on a new revenue stream. So we've seen a lot of users find success, usually with lawyers for some odd reason, who with 1 month of advertising have paid for the product for the entire year, which has been great. The other thing I've also seen is either A, I have a lawyer who pays for everything in 1 month for the entire year and I'm sold. But then I've also seen an uptick in upselling individual spots. So Chris's restaurant, hey, it's $100 a spot, but for like $125, anytime you have Chris's restaurant pops on the air, I'm going to put a picture of Chris right there on the HD radio, right? And so all of a sudden, it's an easier sell from an individual spot versus, let's say, the entire spot block delivery campaign, right? But there's revenue to be made there. Now, the flip side is if I'm an underwriting station and I have, let's say, a nonprofit or something like that, we have the show delivery, the promo aspect of it where, hey, it's the Amanda Show right now, 3 to 7. The example I like to give is the fundraising events. Wouldn't it be really nice when you're doing a fundraising weekend? So this weekend we're fundraising. Would it be really great at Friday at like 2 p.m. to have a QR code with, hey, we're fundraising right now, donate here, right? That's a great idea on that behalf. So promoting your station, promoting yourself while also making some revenue, or you're focusing on the fundraising aspect, it's a great way to help you out. We're seeing new car dash reporting analytics. That's the Xperia, what do you call it? The DTS auto stage. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit of a sucker for that myself. I shouldn't say that out in the recording session, but I saw that 2 years ago with Juan, and I was like, this is going to be a deal breaker. This is going to be huge. And so I'm very curious about that. I've been monitoring it myself. Just the idea of the heat maps and the what's played. And now, obviously, that data is skewed just a little bit because it's the nature of the beast, right? There are certain formats that have certain demographics that would have certain cars that cater better or worse to those things. But just like anything else with Nielsen, right? We all know you get, in my market specifically, if I got a 54-year-old Hispanic male, all of a sudden he's weighted like 10 people deep because that's the, that's we got the diaries in. So I just find that something very interesting about that aspect. And I think listeners are also picking up on the user experience of this as well. There's also bigger things like, for example, purifying the metadata before the stream. That's more of a corporate level type of solution where I'm trying to say, hey, if this comes through the RDS metadata, replace it and put this instead. It could be, vulgar phrases, certain artists, whatever it is. It's a way of, again, of purifying the metadata before it hits the end user. There is a case for that as well. And again, also modern now playing information. That's also great. I said there, one of the things you can do is actually tease the song itself, which is what you're seeing right here. This is one of our examples that we have, but I'm sure there's others, obviously. So on the left-hand side, what you're seeing is kind of how that's being distributed across the board. So when I am a spot block, I'm going to play a campaign, either the individual spot upsell or the entire length of the campaign. If I'm a song, of course, I have title and artist information and or album art of my choosing. But what happens in between? And that's where you have some of this visual radio type of benefits. So the idea that you have the legal ID, well, that's a non-song, non-spot. So we'll play a station slogan, right? Dan FM, all of the hits. Great. Then there's song 1, and that's going to, of course, be the title and artist. Then there's link 2, which we can rotate with the station slogan. So then it turns into Chris Alexander, live, Monday through Friday, 3 to 7, right? And whatever tagline you want, 3 to 7, or this guy's funny, or whatever it is, right? That type of thing. Then you have song 2 again, title and artist information, album art. Link 3, rotating some of those things between the station slogan and the show, followed by the spot block, which is the full advertising campaign, however that could be. What we're also seeing in just doing this own slide is that we're even seeing program directors have a need for in between the song itself. So we can also split that up and say 60% are title and artist, 30% can be a song campaign, which is just a promo or whatever you want to air during the length of a song. And the last 10%, and these values can be controlled, is teasing the next upcoming title and artist, keeping that forward momentum, keeping the audience locked on there. And it's funny because I have found that PDs have very strong opinions on some of this stuff. I was actually surprised. In at least our system, we have a heartbeat sensor. So think of a news talk format with 20 minutes of technically no audio, depending on how you view that, where that audio is coming through. We just want a heartbeat sensor to say, hey, I'm still like paying attention, I'm not falling asleep, that type of thing. So we typically put ours at like a setting at like 9 minutes or something. So every 9 minutes, we just kind of send a little trigger out, and it will rotate depending on where it is, right? So if it's station slogan, we send a trigger, the show will air or something like that. But what I found, though, surprising is there was a very large VP of programming who was like, well, it's a classic rock format. Of course, they know the song. They know it. I'd rather them see something visually to cue something else. So he actually moved that heartbeat sensor from 9 minutes to 2 minutes so that he was rotating the metadata in the car in the HD to show the end listener something that he felt more compelling than, oh, I'm still on Freebird, right? I know it's Freebird, right? That type of thing. So that's some innovative stuff that I feel is very interesting that's coming down the pipeline as well. So benefits of embracing a modern radio automation solution or just software solution overall. We mentioned in the very beginning, what we found is this is really, it's becoming, I feel, a business decision, right? There's somebody in there that is saying, I need to do this. I need to do this tomorrow. Or it's I'm good, right? I'm happy where I am. I'm content where I am. There's no wrong answer there. But what I've found is there's usually some type of factor that's having them have this conversation. So is a smaller real estate footprint. That's been a big deal as well. I can tell you, I think it was iHeart saved over $1 million in real estate costs last year because they reduced their rack room footprint, right? That was their goal. That's what they wanted to achieve. They were successful in doing so. Others, simplifying the IT. Let's be honest. Windows updates, Amanda, have been fun now that they've pretty much banned you from not being able to turn off and disable Windows updates, right? We're seeing the change of audio drivers in Windows and how that operates, right? The OS updates, where I got to get a new OS every year now, it seems like. Virus software maintained, that type of thing. All of that, and then tie that in with hardware failures and servers to maintain and all of this stuff. And there's a conversation to be had when I scale this out from, let's say, a 2, 3, 5 station cluster to a 100 station, corporate cluster. Yeah, that starts to add up pretty quickly when we want to handle those things. I also mentioned one of the sites that wanted to remove the production rooms. That was simply, if I have a 7 station cluster and there's 3 prod rooms, that's 3 less machines, 3 less studios, 3 less environments to maintain and support, right? So it does add up over time. I want to be clear on my end that we're still prioritizing talent and content. Again, always being tied to the studio, having that flexibility now. It comes to the territory. I can bring in people from outside sources. The idea for security is still there, for Zeta to go for VPN or Zeta Cloud 2-factor authentication, your MFA, whatever it is. But the idea is that we're still prioritizing content. I had one Zeta Cloud user that their favorite part of this whole thing was they had a morning show person that lived 2 hours away. They moved during COVID. And they're like, well, you got to come back. And they're like, nah, I'm not going to come back. They're like, okay. Here's a Comrex, here's a timeline, do your thing, and they're trying to incorporate that, right? That's something that, okay, you do you. We're prioritizing the talent, and all of a sudden we can do that in a much more modern, robust way when we have something like a cloud solution in there too. So sharing talent, prioritizing talent, I want to make sure that's not lost in translation here, right? I still want to make sure that we prioritize that talent. How do we take a show and share that show across the board, adding in that show once in the universal environment, or if you guys are picking on what I'm putting down over here, with a disaster recovery solution in play with a bi-directionality benefit, to then go to that person and say, when you add that national syndicated show for us, do it at the cloud level using 2-factor authentication, not a VPN, having that file then distribute across the board with metadata that's been added once, you can start to see some of those modern benefits of delivering it from the top down or a spoken wheel type of solution, right? And the last one too is really identifying how this is going to help you, right? This is your operations, not my operations. Dan's different from Amanda, which is different from Chris, right? I have found that there is a couple engineers where they're really fighting with this change. And the reality is these are tools to make work with you, not against you. If you find yourself fighting with these types of tools, it might not be that's part of your solution. And from my perspective, we have traditional radio, right? Again, Zeta's not going to go anywhere, right? So it's all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a second. Are you trying to force a square peg into a triangle hole here? Or is it, hey, listen, my peg, my square has changed and I need to adapt, be it a budget, real estate, IT, or whatever that solution is, right? There's that change in that environment. But I really do believe that if you feel like, and I've had these conversations, I'm not afraid to have it. If cloud is not part of your solution, it's not part of your solution. You're good. We're operating as it is. Radio in the car is still king. Right? We know that after all these years. and with no disrespect for the changing environment, but we went from, the satellite's going to kill us. This is going to kill us. Spotify's going to kill us. This is going to kill us. We've taken a bunch of punches in radio, at least in my own 20 plus year, 10-year working in radio. So all of a sudden it's like, well, this comes too. Well, we need to embrace it, but based on how we want to handle that, right? And so, again, if you notice that a lot of this conversation is surrounding the idea of that we want to empower you to have that conversation to see where this fits in your solution. Because we've also seen a lot of, decision makers going to you and saying, Dan, we'll be incorporating AI. What does that mean? Right? It's such a vague sentence. So I would much rather go and say, all right, well, Chris, we got to incorporate AI. Okay, great. Are we doing more voiceover talent? Are we going to replace our on-air talent with some AI voices? Oh, whoa, no. We love our talent. Our talent's great. Cool. So we're on a workflow AI driven. So you're looking to simplify and automate some workflows through AI. What's some stuff that we can do? Let me look into it and get back to you. Right? That type of thing. So now that conversation with your boss is much different than, no, I'm not doing AI. No, I'm not doing the cloud. No, I'm not doing this. Right? Because there was a line in that previous session I was trying not to repeat, but it's coming up organically, which was, he said to the lines of I'm going to push this. Sorry, I'm going to push it right now. But essentially, the paraphrase was, if you embrace AI, it's not going to replace you. If you fight against AI tooth and nail, you will be replaced. Because it's not about the AI, it's embracing the change. That's where we are right now, right? Hey, I'm going to try to incorporate this as best I can, whatever it is, versus no, I'm not doing that. It's a different response, right? When you're saying, no, I'm not doing that, that tells your boss, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to listen to you and do what you want to do. Versus, okay, let's see if we can incorporate this down the road, but I'm not going to go and replace Amanda. She's too valuable to this environment. That type of thing. Make sense? So, after ranting all this time, I'm curious, like where do you feel? I kind of left this open for some questions. I know it's just us here, but like that's type of thing. Like, where do we feel like, this trending, where we want to do? Like, do you feel like, no, there needs to be more AI incorporated? Do you feel like, hey, the cloud is kind of where it needs to be right now? Or is there something missing in there too? And I'll be honest with you, I've been having a lot of great conversations with engineers and programmers while we get to tour around. And it's interesting to see their takes on it. I mentioned the audio display in the song in the thing of 2 minutes. And this is just you can email me if you're curious about any kind of topics. But that's something that's in there, which is interesting because I didn't think that a VP of programming would want to go and take away the title and artist and album art of a song. But when I heard him talk about why, it was like, oh, that makes total sense. Because of course they're going to know the name of that song and see that song or hear that song or whatever it is based on that format, right? That makes total sense. So that's my email over there. You can always feel free to shoot me discussions or any of that stuff. I always love having this chat in here too. So as hopefully Amanda and Chris knows, any questions, concerns, comments, I always joke, or dinner recipes, I'm always here to help out as well. So there we go. You're mute, Dan. Still mute. I'm blaming teams.
There we go.
Always team's fault.
A lot of great food for thought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nathan. I appreciate you being here. You inspired some thought. You also really highlighted some things that we're already doing. For instance, we used we're not using AI operationally, but we're using it under the hood. We recently had a situation where we needed to distribute a produced program, and I'm talking a program that had, songs and other things in it. And we needed to distribute it to our stations, and we needed to distribute it with metadata intact. And well, that's not an option. with Zeta right now, anyway. And mostly Todd Dixon's efforts. He used AI to create the bones of a Python script that actually that actually push buttons in Zeta. And so we could take publisher, export the metadata, and then grab those pieces of it and put it in the exact spots, and it's all automated. So it what used to take 30 minutes for somebody to do a 20-minute show, now they can do it in 2 or 3 minutes. And
kudos to Todd.
Yeah, and AI, it didn't do the whole thing, and it wasn't perfect, but it got us in the ballpark, and then we were able to go in there and tweak the code and get it, and we nailed it. So that's just one.
Awesome.
That's just one example of that. Also, we're using in several of our markets, we're doing what you were talking about with the metadata. Where we have, law firms, big dog law. What is it around here, Amanda? It's
Wilhite wins.
Yeah, Wilhite wins. We do that, and we sell day parts to clients, and so they get interleaved song title and artist, and then the client message, and the client logo pops up, and those kind of things. And we're doing DTS auto stage and all those things. So I think in this day and age, we got to do it all. Part of it's for the money. I think a lot more of it is to be competitive with everything else that's out there.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I'd rather use my CarPlay or my radio now that I have it and have title artists. I love album artwork. Like I love seeing that on my screen, than to go to my husband's car, which is actually newer than mine, but has an older radio.
Oh, really?
And mine's an aftermarket. I just got it over the summer, but it, his radio is Toyota. It has HD, it has RDS, but it doesn't have anything else, no artwork, and the artwork it does have, I don't know where it grabs it, because
it's got old Grace Note stuff in it. It's what it's got.
It's horrible.
Interesting. But yes, these are all I love it.
Well, thank you again, Nathan. We appreciate everything you did for us today. We very much enjoyed it. We learned some stuff, and we'll circle back with whatever questions and other ideas we may have.
I'm always here to help. Let me know.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.